People have often asked the question, can people in heaven look down from heaven and observe what's going on earth, right? Or are they actually doing that, right? So, oftentimes you might hear somebody who maybe they're thinking about someone who has passed on, and they'll say, well, I know that my grandmother is up in heaven and she's looking down on us. And while those statements might make us feel just a little bit more connected to those who have passed, we have to always interpret or evaluate, if you will, those statements or this reality with Scripture. So what does the Bible say about whether people in heaven can and are actually looking down and observing what is going on earth? Well, let me give you 7 things to consider as we answer this question. Consideration number 1 is that those who are in heaven are not able to experience pain. Now, notice what the text says. It says here, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. So this verse seems to be pretty clear that whenever you and I receive our glorified bodies, that it will be impossible for us to be in heaven and experience pain and suffering and heartache at the same time being in the very presence of God. So whatever our past loved ones who have deceased and have gone on, whatever they're doing in heaven, and even if they are able to look down and observe and see things that are going on down on earth, I can assure you that they are not experiencing pain in heaven, because the Bible does not communicate that heaven is a place that has any sort of pain, suffering, or sorrow at all. Now, consideration number 2 is that heaven is going to be a place of consistent and constant activity. Now, I have an entire other video where I talk about, I think it's 7 things that we're going to do whenever we get to heaven. I'll put a card on the screen. I'm going to put a link in the description so you can check that out. So I'm not going to go through all of that. But basically the idea is this, is that whenever we get to heaven, as much as we might care for those who, we know that are still here on earth and all of that, we're going to be so fulfilled. We're going to be so filled up. We're going to be so excited to be in the presence of God that if I'm being honest with you, I don't think we're going to be too concerned with what's going on down here on earth. I don't think we're going to be spending a whole bunch of time. Let me give you an illustration. Let's just say that somebody gave you 2 free tickets to the Super Bowl, front row, 50-yard line. I mean, you can't get any better. It's right there. Now, you might be aware of what's going on outside of the stadium, but what's your focus? Your focus is going to be to enjoy and to bask in the glow of that experience, because everything that you're experiencing is so exciting, right? It doesn't mean that you're not aware of what's going on outside the stadium. It just means that your focus is. And I believe that that's how heaven is going to be, right? Maybe they will be aware of things that are going on, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this video, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of time and energy and effort put forward focusing on the things that are going on earth, because there will be so much more to enjoy in heaven. Now, consideration number 3 is that those in heaven are able to process the events that are going on here on earth from God's perspective and not ours. Now, the reason why I say this is because sometimes we think that our loved ones might be in heaven and they're up there when they see the sadness or the injustice or things that are going on, and they are just up there all sad and just, oh man, I just wish my loved ones would be doing better, this, that, and the other. But listen, they have the ability to be able to understand the things that are going on here on earth from God's perspective. Why? Because they are in the very presence of God. Once again, let me return to my football analogy and illustrate it this way, right? So whenever you and I are watching our favorite team live, we have all sorts of emotions, right? They get a touchdown, we get excited, but then the other team comes back and kicks a field goal, they tie the game. Or then we think we're going to go down and we're going to score, but then our quarterback throws an interception and then the other team scores, and our emotions are going up and down. Why? Because we don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen in that particular game, and so our feelings go up and down. But if we were to record that game and we were to know the score or the outcome of that game before we watched it, we would watch that game with a totally different perspective, because we wouldn't allow our emotions to go up and down, because we already know, okay, I might be down 21-3, but this we're going to win, right? I know that the score is eventually going to be 30-21. My team wins. So we can watch that game with no stress, with no sort of emotional struggle, because we know at the end of the day we win. And I think that is the perspective that those who are in heaven are able to interpret the things that are going on earth, where you and I don't have that actual advantage. Now, consideration number 4 is that the Bible seems to suggest that heaven rejoices whenever one sinner repents, which means they have to be aware of certain things that are going on here on earth. Notice what it says here in the parable of the lost sheep in Luke chapter 15. It says here, in the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Now, this is basically suggesting that the shepherd, whenever they see one sheep that goes astray, it's not that the other 99 aren't important, but they're going to stop what they do to go after the one that is lost. And this puts a value on one soul that is converted to the kingdom, so much so that when a soul is converted to the kingdom, this parable seems to suggest that there is a celebration going on in heaven, which would also suggest that those who are in heaven have some sort of awareness of the events that are going on here on earth. But once again, we can't use these verses as a proof text and tie too strongly to this and build a theology around it. Consideration number 5 is the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Now, we don't believe this is a parable because Jesus never used proper names in parables, so we believe this is an actual story of a rich man who mistreated a poor person named Lazarus, and then whenever they died, Lazarus went to Abraham's bosom, or paradise, which was a place of comfort, and then this rich man died and went to the Hades, which was a place of torments, right? And while he was there, he was communicating with Abraham, right? And he was also had his remembrance, and he knew that he had brothers who were still on the earth who maybe they weren't, had not repented, and he wanted to be able to warn them so that they would not come to the same place that he was, and they would not experience the same pain and suffering and torment that he was experiencing. So we see that here is an example of somebody who has passed on to the afterlife, but had a clear awareness of something that was still going on here on earth, but it still doesn't say that he was able to see his brothers. It just basically says that he was aware that his brothers were still on earth. So this still does not answer the question of whether people who are in the afterlife are able to actually view and see the events that are actually going on here on earth. Now, consideration number 6 is in the book of Revelation, the martyrs who were crying out to God so that God would avenge them for their blood. Notice what it says. It says here, when the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of all who had been martyred for the word of God and for being faithful in their testimony. They shouted to the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge the people who belong to this world and avenge our blood for what they have done to us? So clearly these people who had been martyred for their faith, they were aware that final judgment had not yet taken place, and as a result, they were crying out to God and saying, hey, how long do we have to wait to see you administer this judgment for the people that have taken our lives because of our testimony? But once again, this passage does not suggest that they were able to look down upon earth and actually have a visual perspective of the events that were unfolding here on earth. It just suggests that they were aware that final judgment has not yet taken place. And then the last one is Hebrews chapter 12, which is one that oftentimes, in my opinion, is misunderstood. And let's read the first verse. It says here, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. Now, oftentimes, whenever you hear somebody quote this verse or teach from this verse, they will interpret it as if it's more like a stadium. You have all these people who have passed on, and they're sitting in a stadium and they're cheering us on, right? We're surrounded by all these cloud of witnesses, right? And we're cheering us on. Go, Alan, go. No, don't do this. No, do that. Make this decision. Don't make that decision, right? But I don't believe that's the picture that the author was actually trying to get us to understand. I think instead of a stadium, we should picture it more like a museum, right? When you go to a museum, you see these different paintings, all right? And looking at the context in Hebrews chapter 11, when he talks about all these people who by faith were able to overcome, right? He says, hey, if you're struggling in your walk, if you're struggling in your journey, go to this museum, this hall of faith, and look at Abraham, look at Moses, look at Isaac, look at Noah, look at all these different people who struggled with their faith just like you. And if they overcame, you can as well. I don't think that this passage is painting the picture that we're surrounded by all these people in heaven that are cheering us on, but rather we have all these people as examples who overcome difficulties in their life, and we can too, and they did it by faith. So can people who are in heaven look down and see and observe the things that are going on here on earth? Well, once again, you guys know me by now. I'm not going to speak dogmatically in an area where the Bible has not actually spoke on, right? Hopefully we can piece together these 7 considerations and come up with some sort of idea. The Bible doesn't say yes or no, but we can say for sure that the things that I shared in this video are true, right? They might be aware of some things, but they are going to be in the presence of God, enjoying the fellowship and the eternal presence and nature of God, so much so that I don't think they're going to be too concerned with the things that are going on here on earth. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comment section below and let's talk about it. Hey, I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.